I was able to slip the headlight in. I took a couple of clamps off, and then I laid these other two, I just laid them back a little further. Move this one down to the front. I can keep all this in the same position. I was able to slip it in there. There's a little bit of a interference right here. You can see where the headlight is, try to focus this. There we go. Headlight's rubbing right on that front edge of the fender, and this being an aftermarket fender, I'm sure it's just the fender. I'm going to cut a little bit of that plastic off right there. I could cut some metal off, but I don't want to cut any metal off and weaken the fender. I'll just take a little bit of this plastic off, and this piece of the headlight that's sticking out, you can see when it slips past that spot, slips past that right there, it's rubbing. It'll hold a line up right there, and that'll lay in flush. So I'm just going to trim that off right in there off the headlight where it stopped rubbing, and that'll have that. We got a good gap. We got a good gap here at the front. Seal is actually touching the headlight. We got a pretty consistent gap through here. It looks good to me. I remember from the last 2013 I did, silver one, that's about what the gap looked like on the headlight. So I'm pretty confident I can weld in the side rail where it's sitting. We should be fine. We'll go ahead and get the fender and the headlight back out, and I'll start prepping the side rail for welding. Okay, it's all marked. I've got spots like these right here. I was saying I was going to actually hit this with a spot weld drill again. I went there and just ran it for a split second to mark it. That gave me a little center divot. What I'll do is I'll come back and I'll drill through that. I've got a note for smaller diameter there. And everywhere I've got a P, that's where I want to punch a hole. So these will be plug welds directly to the piece behind it. These four, same thing, smaller diameter here. Same as that. This spot, I'm just going to grind where the X is. I do all this so I don't have to remember and get confused when I take it off as to what I got to do. That in there, I'm just going to cut, probably drill that a little bit. I got to leave a little material, similar to this hole, leave a little bit of material visible so I can weld that piece onto the third sheet back there and then weld the whole thing up. I've got that note right there pointing down to that. These I just marked with white, this is all white Sharpie paint pen. I'm just going to grind the white away so I know that wherever I weld will stick there. I got to come back and I got to grind some of this off in here too. Same thing all the way down the rail. I've got these marked with a P where I want to punch a hole. All the way down. Same thing underneath. All these go under, all the way down the side. These two under here, I'm going to do the same thing with a smaller diameter hole because this is 3-layer. I got a note there for that. These weren't real clean coming out, so what I'm going to have to do is fold this out a little bit more, get in there with a grinding wheel and grind back the third sheet and get it smooth. There's a little bit of steel left at that weld site. These down here, this was a 3-layer weld from the factory. It's this brace, the piece I'm replacing, and then the piece behind it. But it's already spot welded together from Honda on the replacement part. So it'd make more sense to drill from the back side. Well, once I take it off, I can drill it from the front, but I need a hole all the way through here, and I can weld it from the back side. Because these two are already welded together, so if I weld from the back and weld through a hole on the back sheet, that'll weld the back one to this, and they'll all be connected. Same thing up here. There's no reason to drill this out, the spot weld out of here just to weld it to that back there. It'd make more sense to weld it from the back. I do have access. It'll be tight, but that'll make this simpler and even a better weld, so I'm not drilling through all of it. And I just got to drill some holes. I don't think I can punch through this stuff. It's pretty thick. And it's that 590 MPa high strength steel, so I've got 6 of those I may have to drill. I'm not even going to try the punch, I don't think. I may try it since I have it out anyway, but I don't think it's going to go through that. I think that's going to be it. And get it out of here and start grinding and drilling. Alright, everything on here is prepped. I got a couple more spots on here to hit with the grinder just to clean them up along this top edge. I got this piece done. This part here ground where it goes through for those plug welds along the side. In every spot I've got a hole. I punched a hole. I ground off the E-coat on both sides. All under here. Every mating flange. All on the outside. I'm going to get it back in the car. And the two back here where I'm going to weld from the inside, these two, I'm going to go and grind the finish off of that inner plate that goes in here. Once I get this piece in, that way it'll hold it steady for me. I can just run the file belt over those two areas on that other piece so that the weld will have just bare metal around it. Keep the paint out of it. I'm going to work it back into the car, get it all clamped, and recheck all the dimensions. I marked it. You can see that scribe line right there. And right along there, where it was, inside between these two pieces. I'll get it back in the same position there, and made it up to the bottom. Double check my dimension across from the mounting tab here to the other side. And get it all clamped in and start welding. Alright, I got it clamped in. Checked all the measurements again. Everything's looking good. I've done one weld right here. I'll show you this one. I'm going to go to that next one right there since it's nice and tight. And I'm going to start skipping around. But I'll show you that one right there. Sorry about the light back there, but I got to have it on. Alright, I'll go around, do the rest of these, be back when it's finished. Okay, it's just about ready to paint. Got everything scuffed. Even inside here, I sanded out all my scratches from wherever I was pushing on it with the ram. Just got all that in 180. Not real worried about the grit. I'm gonna put enough coats of easy coat over it and dull base coat that it's not gonna show. I need to add some seam sealer back, like right in there where I had to damage it. And there's a spot right in there where I've got to add it back along that seam. And then I need to come through here and grind down these welds that are visible. I'm just going to grind these ones across the top and this one right here. The rest of them really aren't even going to be seen. And I'd rather leave all the metal there than to thin it out and weaken it, since that's a structural member. So I'm just going to leave those alone. Just going to grind them down. The ones I can get to with the grinded disc, I'll do with that, but the rest of them I'll have to get with the file belt. Once I get all that done, I'm going to start pouring epoxy. I'm going to try to get some syringes and maybe some with needles where I can just inject it into these weld areas and just flood it. Areas like this, I can pour it, but it's going to start running this way. I want to get it in from this edge and flood it that direction. Same thing with these. I need to get in here and just try to get it right underneath this edge of the bottom sheet and just inject it into these areas. We'll see what I can find. Got some medicine syringes for kids, but I'll need something a little bit sharper on the end. Went ahead and sprayed a little easy coat down in these holes just because if it starts to flash rust in there, I won't be able to get it back out without maybe sandblasting it, but this will just save me some time. Just flooded it in there and then came back and wiped the surface and just sprayed a little more on it. Let it run through here. I'll actually pour some epoxy in there too, but went ahead and put that on just so it doesn't rust on me until I can get around to doing that. Everything's scuffed up even over into here. Since I've got to paint this side and I burned the paint off, just gonna blow my paint over onto this bracket. And I've got to get down inside there too, so I'll probably work my way from the inside out, get inside here with the easy coat, coat all that, come out here, do this. I'm gonna blend down this direction on this rail, stop it somewhere in here. Once I get all the easy coat on it, I'll come back and do all the seam sealer. That can't go over bare metal, that's got to go over some sort of paint or primer, and then I'll come back after that sets up and I'll spray on some burgundy base. I've got some left over from a GM truck that's just about an exact match, I think, for this. Be good enough for the rail at least. I don't want to use any of the expensive paint mix for this. This red's going to be pretty darn high. So I'm just going to spray on what I got left over. Plus I don't have this mix yet anyway, so that'll get this done. I was going to wait till I skinned the door to do all this, but I want to go ahead and get this bare metal covered up. I'm not ready to skin the door just yet. Went ahead and got it trimmed or detrimmed. Got the handle out. I went ahead and took this molding piece off. It overlaps the skin right there by like 1/8 of an inch, so it was going to kind of hold me up from getting the skin on. So I went ahead and just pulled it off. One screw back here, and it was just taped. This was kind of a bear to get off. They use these really tight clips that go down in here, grab onto the door. They're really, really hard to release. So I ended up having to just break those to save the molding. I'll get 4 of these. It takes 4 of those across the top. They're fairly cheap. So I like to come in here and cut these welds off. I think there's 3 in there. That one back there. Then I'll grind all the way around the perimeter to get the skin off, but I'll have to straighten this first. I'll put the spreader in here and a block of wood and push all that out and get it straight enough before I pull it off of there. I've got the inside off, inside trim panel. Took the vapor barrier off, disconnected the handle, pulled the handle and all out. The bracket for the handle that's still in there will come off with the skin, and I'll take it off then. It just makes it a little bit easier. Got the speaker out, everything else is out. The regulator and all still in, but I took the glass out because I'll be grinding around it. I don't want to pit it up with sparks. I'm trying to make the door as light as possible because I'll have to take it off by myself, reskin it, and hang it back on. I'm not going to pull the wiring out. I will have to disconnect it up there and disconnect the check strap right here. And then once I unbolt the door, I'll actually have it shut. So this end will be held for me. I'll take the 4 bolts out of the hinges there and there. And then I'll just grab the door here and release it with my other hand, and then grab the other side, pull it off. Same thing when I mount it. I'll tape up the back door so I don't scratch it, and I'll set it on the latch and just latch it on there and then push it in, put the bolts in. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a tap of that same thread, I'll put the tap in the door, and then I'll swing the hinge open and put the tap inside the hinge to hold it up. And I'll swing it around, latch it, and put the other 3 bolts in, pull that tap back out, and run the bolt in it. I may do it that way, but you got to have a fairly light door so you don't break your tap off in the door. That's one way to thread something into it, or you could take a long bolt and just cut the head off, but it gives you a stud to hang onto the hinge while you're trying to put the door on by yourself. I think somebody sells a tool like that, but all you really need is a long bolt with no head on it. Alright, I'm stretching out the door now, trying to get it to match the fender. I've got the spreader in there. I've got a block of wood on the A-pillar post there, and I've got a spreader in there just to protect the door frame. I'm not worried about the seam sealer getting damaged or the outside edge of the skin here, but I'd rather not scratch up the inside of the door frame if I can help it, just because that's more I have to fix later when I skin it and paint the jamb. I've marked it from here to this white mark is too far in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push all this out. And then while I've got some pressure on this area, I'm going to hammer this part back in. This part right here is too far out. Just from when I put the fender on before, while I had it there, I marked it. And I would like to just get everything, I know this is way too far out, so I'm going to knock it in, but I'd like to get everything just a little bit too high, and I can come back with the fender on I can just tap it in to match. That way I don't have to get in behind it with the fender on it. But this will be kind of a slow process. I'll have to pull out all this area, tap this in a little bit, try the fender, pull it back off. And I won't have to bolt it in, I'll just have to hold it up there, get it close. See how far I've gotten and how much more to do, but just slowly get this to match the fender. And when I get real close to it, I'll push it all out just a little bit more so that I can get the fender back on it and bolt it in place where it's going to be. I can come out here with a block of wood and tap all this edge right back down, get it flush with the fender, then I can pull the door. I'm going to go ahead and spread out a little bit on this and show you that. But this will probably take a little while, so I'll just work at it till I get it, and I'll be back when I get it straight. Alright, with that pressure on it, I'm going to knock that in, and I'll test fit the fender. I'll be back when I get the fender hung on it. Alright, I'm going to move the spreader down into this area, then I'll probably come back up here a little bit, then I'll test fit the fender. Let's see how close we are now. Alright, that's somewhere close to where it's going to end up being. Somewhere in there. So I've got this too far out now. This is still out. That was already out anyway. I got to go further in there. Then you come out right in here. You give me a marker. I'm gonna write low right there. High right there. This in here is really close. This all in here is right now is too high. I don't care if it's too high. I can always come back and knock it in. I'd like to get it all a little bit too far out. And I can bolt the fender in place where it's going to end up being. And come through here with a board right on the edge and stay away from the new fender, but just tap that in to match it. You can always go a little further in. So I want to get a hair too far out, and then I'll knock it in where it needs to go. I don't know if you can tell this at the angle I've got the camera, but right about there is where the fender's going to end up. Let's see, right there. So I've got everything at least flush or further out. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt the fender in place, match it back to the hood to where it's going to end up staying. Then I'll tap that edge in where it needs to go, and then any final touches I need to make to this edge, I'll do when I have it off with the skin laid on it, the new one. It's as far as I'm going to take it with the door still on it. I'm going to have to file the hole under here out a little bit in the front so the fender can go back about another millimeter or two. It needs to go back just about touching back here, and I'll close this gap up a little bit. It needs to go back about like that. But I was able to just hold it in position down there where it's going to be, and I've got the door edge just about where it needs to be. It's still a little bit low right there, but I can take care of that when I get the skin off. I can just dolly the frame, and right in here is a hair low, but I can just roll that lip out on the frame when I get the skin off of it. I just want to get it, 95% there. It's pretty close. I can get the rest of it out in the frame. I think that's good enough. I'll go ahead and take the door off now. Alright, I'm pulling the wiring out. The connector's inside the A-pillar. This rubber surrounds this clip right here, so you have to actually pull the rubber away from it. Then there's 4 little clips, just like a wiring harness connector. Sort of, you push down a little tab inside that hole right there. There's one there, one on the bottom, one on each side. Release the clips and this whole thing will come out. Then you'll have to run this rubber piece back around this before you snap it back in, on the way back in. But right now I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to pull these 2 connectors loose. I'm going to put some, probably a piece of wire or something on them in case they fall down in there where I can't grab them again. Or something, just attach something to it where I can push it in there and still be able to pull it back out if I lose reach. If they for some reason go back in the hole too far and I can't grab them. I'm going to disconnect that. Then I'm going to disconnect this check strap on the inside. And then I'll be able to get the door off. Be right back. Alright, the door is off. Whenever you open the door up, I went ahead and took the check strap out of the door, which was right there, that hole. Whenever you open up the door to get in here to take the bolt out of it, it's extended because the door is open. You can sort of halfway shut the door to press it back in a little bit, but then when you take the bolt out and you go to shut the door to get it to latch to hold this in for you, that piece is sticking out of the door and it wants to catch on this part of the A-pillar and over in this corner as you shut the door, and it'll scratch all this up. So you could tape all this and protect it, or just take it out. I have to take it out anyway to get it out of my way. Probably work around it, but I like to just get it out of the way since I need it out of the way anyway. Just get it out of the way right then. Then we don't have to worry about shutting it on the A-pillar. And that'll allow me to shut the door and I can get right back in here to these bolts. I just ran all 3 out, left the top one. As soon as I got the top one loose, I stuck a spreader in the bottom between the door and the rocker, keep it from scratching the rocker up. And I was holding this side of it up and just released it and just picked it up, set it off on the ground here. I'm going to get it on a rack and start cutting the skin off in a minute. There was plenty of room in here for me to be able to get to these 2 wires, so I just left them in there. I can't really go any further in than that anyway. All this looks good in here. I already started pulling this off. Top seal, like when I had it on the car. What I'm going to do, whenever I skin a door that's got a seal like this, I'm going to cut the back, I'm going to flip it over, cut the skin off, and then once I've got access from the inside of the door, I'll pinch all the clips that are inside and release these so I don't break any of them. This seal's got to come off so I can do the jam, but to avoid having to take any of this out or having to tape off any stickers or anything, what I'm going to do is take this little bumper out. I'll take this piece off once I get the skin off, where I can release the clips from the back. And once this is off, what I'll do is I'll mask a line under here, and I'll paint from there all the way out. That'll avoid having to paint in here. I'll have a tape line behind the seal because that runs all the way around, and I'll just paint up to this joint right here and tape it off and tape it along right in here behind where the seal is going to be. So what I'll have to do next is go around, flip it over, go around and grind the edge off so I can cut through where it's hemmed, just fold it over. So I'll just cut through that and I can take the whole skin off. It's got 3 beams in here. This is the actual intrusion beam right here. It's glued to the skin with a flexible foam, which I'll have to replace. This is just a stiffener beam, keep it from fluttering. Also glued, and there's one that runs along the top under there. Same thing. And that one's underneath the folded lip of the skin, which this is actually not even bonded to it. It's just folded over. It's where the molding goes, the upper belt molding. So I will have to cut the skin off everywhere, and I think I can pull the skin off the door and up this way and slip it off of this. I don't think it's glued at all. I can kind of see it moving. You can see that right there. It'll open up. It's not bonded to that upper brace at all. I may actually put some foam in there just to stick it to it a little better than that when I go back to do it later. But I'm going to get it flipped over. I need to drill the spot welds and then grind the edges. It's pretty late tonight. I can't do any grinding, but I'll probably drill the spot welds off and get it ready to do for later. Alright, I'm going to take the file belt here and take out that spot weld. There's one here and then one on the very end. I'm not worried about keeping any of this. This is the door skin. So I'm just going to shave that out. Then once I get the skin off, I'll come back and I'll clean that area up again with this just to get it flat again. Can't get a grinding wheel in there. I could use my spot weld drill, the C-clamp style drill, but there's no reason to put a perfect hole in the skin because I don't need to keep it. So I'm just going to thin this out, and that way I can just pull it off with the rest of it. There is seam sealer along this seam. Once I get done, I'll re-seam seal this and I'll paint this whole section. I'll just mask it off and I'll paint the skin and then this. I'll probably do this before the outside. I'll just do it with the inside of the door. I can reach under here, flip it over or whatever. Do it first and flip it over and paint the jamb because this won't make contact with the rack. And just do it all at one time. Then I'll just mask over here and paint all the way down when I paint the outside of the door. That looks deep enough there. Next thing will be to grind around the edges and then lift the skin off. I do have one more spot weld right here. I'll hit that real quick. And then all the spot. I'm opening up the new skin. Let's see what we got here. Typically it's nothing but the outer sheet. Sometimes you got to transfer a brace over to this before you can put it in the car, but in this case, that brace is welded in a door frame on each end. So I can leave it on the door. And a lot of shops will just put the skin on just like this, but I don't like having just E-coat inside. That's not really enough corrosion protection, so I like to clean this really well. I'll just kind of halfway scuff it, and I'll epoxy the inside of the door. And while I have that epoxy out, I'll do all the epoxy on the rail and all that all at one time. That way I can mix it up one time. I'll epoxy all this in here, and then once that's cured up, I'll come back with the Easy Coat and match the factory E-coat color in here, and then I'll dust a little red over it whenever I do the rail. That way it looks like it was never done on the inside of the door. Looks pretty good. They don't really package these very well. Actually the back of the box was open, or anything could have just hit it from the back side. Sometimes you'll get a piece of bubble wrap stuck to it just to keep the box from rubbing the E-coat off, but this didn't have anything, and it's rubbed through right here on this edge. That would have gotten sanded through anyway with the DA when I go to do that. So this is what you get. This is the part that goes in the mirror pocket, and I'll use this hole to locate it. And this edge of the door, I've got it marked with Sharpie, so I have that also to line it up to. A lot of this Sharpie I'll lose when I cut the sealer, but at least got that hole and the edge to go by, and then I got the edge of the door here. It's not actually touching the edge of the door right in there, but it's pretty close. I've got that marked with Sharpie. right in here. I taped this up while I was grinding it so I wouldn't hit this. Essentially all I got is that piece, and this edge right in here is this edge right here. And it's folded back about 45 degrees so you can drop it on the top of the door. And the rest of it's basically a 90-degree bend everywhere. Let me flip it on over. I'm not going to do any of the epoxy on the inside until I get everything to fit, go through a dry run or two on fitment, make sure it's good to go before I paint anything. So you've got a 90-degree lip all the way around. This will just get hammered and dollied slowly. You'll go back and forth. You'll see me do. All right, I mixed up about 8 ounces of epoxy so that I can flood some into these welds. And then since I have some mixed up anyway, I'll go ahead and just spray it on the outside, and that we'll have an extra layer there of protection before I put some easy coat on it. And I'll just hit the areas of bare metal with that. There's no point in putting epoxy everywhere. I'll probably run it all up the rail just because there's no original paint there. It's all just E-coat. I've got it mixed and let it set up for the induction time for probably an hour. It's about 60 degrees in here. And I found these on Amazon. See if I can focus on this. B. Steen, I guess is the brand. 3 mil syringes with blunt dispensing needles and caps. It looks like I can just take. It looked like it would work. They've got just a bunch of syringes, but there's 2 sizes of needles here, and it's pretty tiny. Probably a 1 millimeter, maybe a ½ millimeter, something like that. I don't know if it says it on here or not. And it says 14 gauge and 20 gauge. That was about $8, but I can actually, for the few times I use these, I can just throw them away. I may save the needles or just buy a new kit every time I need to, because there's not enough needles for every single one, at least of the small ones. But I can draw up some epoxy in one of these and then put the, I think the pink needle is the smallest one. The smallest 20 gauge, I guess, needle. Put on here, and I can inject the epoxy in between these 2 layers and just flood it around. I'm going to use that, and I can just toss this when I'm done. There's really no point in cleaning it. I think there's 8 of these in here, or no, 10. Yeah, that's 10. This will get me through, a few years probably. Once that stuff's set up, I'll do this, and then I'll take the rest of the epoxy and spray it there, and the inside of the door skin. I'm not sure where the video left off on me showing you the skin. I ran out of memory on the phone here. But essentially, I've got all this scuffed with a red pad, just real lightly. Doesn't have to be too aggressive. But right on the inside edge here, the inside ½ inch or so is where it's going to bond to the door frame. So I've rubbed that pretty hard with the Scotch-Brite. You can see that. Got it really dull. And normally you can glue this directly to the door, but I'm going to spray this with epoxy and easy coat and dust it with some red. So I've sanded this really, really well, just like I would have if I was going to bond it directly to the door. This way the epoxy will stick really well to that. And I'll come back after the epoxy's set up, and I'll just scuff it again just around this edge. That way the panel bond will stick to that. You can tape this off and then epoxy it and then pull the tape. That'll save you a little bit of work, but I'd rather have epoxy back there everywhere. And I'll just run the Scotch-Brite back around it. It won't take another 30 seconds. So I'll make sure I get this ready to go with epoxy. After I spray that, I'll hit this skin, and I'll also hit the fender. So while I've got about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to let the epoxy set up, I'm going to go ahead and grind this skin off. Since it's Saturday today, I can make some noise. So I'm going to grind all this off, get the skin off, and then do whatever else I can do while I'm waiting on that epoxy. Then I'll go move on to injecting it over there. All right, I'm going to start on the bottom here, and I'll show you that. Then I'll go do the sides off the camera, and then I'll come back when I'm peeling it up. I'm going to have to heat up these areas on the skin with the heat gun just so I can pull it off that glue and try to save what's there. looks like when you start splitting the skin off. Maybe you can see this. I'm gonna have trouble focusing on that. Let's see. Maybe you can tell right in there. It's just may not focus on it. There we go. See how it split through? I'll do that all the way around, and then I'll just be able to peel it off. Alright, it's ground all the way around. I may have to do some more on the very top with the spot welds. But over here on the front where it was all stretched and had some tension on it, the outside part just popped off, and it just popped up a little bit from the frame. But I'm going to run a thin putty knife through the whole thing all the way around until I get the thing up just enough to where I know it's broken loose from the frame. Then I'll go in here and I'll heat up those areas with the heat gun where that NVH foam is. Try to release that without having to go in and cut it. That spot weld back here popped right off when I ran the file belt on. Probably have to run the putty knife into the top of the other 2 or 3 of them, we'll see. Okay, that one's off. I have to go underneath these 2. I've got a seal and paint in here anyway, so I'm not too worried about putting a little bit of scratch in it. May have to cut some more material off the weld. Alright, that one popped. This one's going to go too. Gotta be careful around this area. This is all the chrome trim. Got it taped up. Alright, it looks like it's loose. I'm going to go get the heat gun out and get ready to heat the glue up. Alright, I'm up underneath it, just popped it up. There is actually panel bond glue in there from the factory, but it's not done quite as well as what I can do aftermarket. They put just enough in there to hold it. And I actually put a couple of spot welds. They're one-sided spot welds on the outside. I'll show you that when I flip it over. I'm going to roll this back so I can start lifting it and heat the glue inside. You can heat it from the outside or the inside, whatever's easiest. I'll just decide in a minute. Alright, I had one piece come off without any heat. Right in here, got the heat gun all the way up. Just going to heat that area until I get it to release, and I'll be pulling on the outside of the skin just until it comes off. Alright, that's taking a little bit too long. I'm just going to reach in there and cut it. I'm going to be replacing it anyway, but I'll try to leave as much as I can. If it'll come off easily, but in this case it won't. So I'm just going to go ahead and reach in there with the putty knife and just cut it. Go ahead and get this thing off. Okay, I just got everything broken loose. Just pulled it up this way till I got everything broke off, and then I had to pull it. This bottom edge is folded into the door, so I had to pull it off this way. Alright, you can see now I just left this on the door so it can come off with it. I'll show you what's inside here. See, the factory, they put some panel bond on here, but it still gets some rust forming in here. When I go back to put it on, I'll coat every bit up with panel bond and then add another bead. So when you put the skin on, it squeezes that bead out. It'll seal this whole area in here. It's almost squeezed around the outside. Here's another clip. This one actually could be reused. This little side here is bent over, but I bought enough to reuse all or replace all of them, so I'm not gonna worry about that. And now that I've got access to all these clips for the seal, I can release those from inside and not risk damaging those. I'll have to get over here. I'll have to straighten some of this flange up just a little bit. I've got it close. What I can do is hang this back on the door just like it is. I mean on the car, just like this is right here with no skin. And then I can match this up to the fender and just get it almost flush with the fender, just a little bit lower. See, there's some rust. It's just where the factory E-coat doesn't get. I'll be able to coat that. I'll have to weld there too. You can just panel bond the whole thing on, which I may end up doing. It just depends on how things look when I get to that point and what I decide to do. This is all the foam that's stuck to it. What I'll have to do is I'll leave everything that's still tight, like that right there is loose. Pull that off and leave that stuff there. I'll just add some to the top of it. It saves a little material. Same thing through here. Get all the loose pieces off. Everything that stays I can leave and just rebond. But I'll put that on. I'll apply that stuff first, then drop the skin on after I put the panel bond on. But that's going to go on first. I need to maximize my work time with the panel bond. So I'll put on the NVH foam on this. And then I'll come back, add the panel bond to the flange here, and then set the skin on it. Because I want to put the panel bond on at the very end, right before I put the skin on. Give me the most time I can get with it to work it in, work the flange over. And I'll need to clean out some of this sealer just along here so the other skin will sit flat. I got to go around and pull the hem flange off. This is one place right here where it's a one-sided spot weld. And you see where it burns the panel bond off just a little bit. There's two more on the other side, so I got to go through on the back side and grind that off, and then this whole piece will just fall off. I just went around and got all the seals taken off. I just went through all these holes in here, and just pinched the clip, pull the seal out. So I've got it loose all the way around. Saved all the clips. And just covered up this hole right here where the lock cylinder bar goes in to turn the lock. I don't want to get grinding shavings in that when I go to grind this flange. I'm also going to cover up the window track with paper. I'm going to put a sheet of paper in here and just tape it down. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over first. Go ahead and get the rest of the hem flange off the door frame on the back side. And there's a little bit of damage right in here in the door. I need to just hammer and dolly this out. You can see that. Just hammer that out while I can without the skin on it. And then I'll flip it back over to prep all this, but I want to get the back side ready to go, so when I get the skin on it, I don't have to do anything back there. So I'm going to prep that first, flip it back over, and I'll be ready to put the skin on. There's one of those one-sided spot welds right here. You can see that. Obviously you can't do a two-sided spot weld, or you'd weld on the outside of the skin. It would show. So they do a one-sided weld here. And here's the back side where those dents were. I got to straighten this area out. I've got to knock this down a little bit. You can see the paint's wrinkled right in there. I need to knock this down and this up, so I just need to flatten this area out. And I'm not going to worry about like body filling all this in here. You're not ever going to see it. I'll put some paint over this when I go to do the jam. I'm just going to get it straight. I'm not too worried about it inside there. But you got to get all this sealer out. I'm going to take a wire wheel and clean all this out of here. So when I go to fold the skin over this side, this is all clear. So I'm going to clean that out, get the rest of the hem flange off, which is all this metal on the outside edge has got to come off. I got to cut through that spot weld. There's one up there. And I think there's one up here also. That one actually may have fallen off. It looks like it was right there. May have already come off. I'm going to clean that channel up all the way around and straighten that area right there up with hammer and dolly. I'll be ready to flip it back over and prep for the skin. That's the entire bottom piece right there. Just got to do the same thing on the other side and get rid of the rest of the steel and clean that channel out. Alright, before I put the epoxy in those joints, I'm going to go ahead and smooth out these welds, because I don't want to put the paint in there and then come back and get this pretty hot and then bubble the epoxy off the surface on the inside where I can't tell what I did anyway and not know where it came off. So I'm going to go ahead and grind this off, give it a few minutes to cool down. Then I'll start pouring the epoxy in. Alright, I got 3 or 4 more to do. I'll be back for the epoxy. Alright, I'm about to inject the epoxy in. Got the smallest needle I could get. Just gonna flood this joint. You can see it's running out here now. Not worried about the outside. I'm going to come back and clean this off. Seems to be working. I'll go around and do the rest of it.